Welcome to the Redeeming Stories podcast. I'm your host, Julie M. Lane. Today's episode is a little different. Recently, I had the opportunity to be a guest on the Green Room podcast out of the Cotswolds in the UK. There, I shared my own story of trauma, faith, resilience, leadership, and healing. In my conversation with Garon, we explored what it means to move from survival to redemption, how our experiences shape our understanding of worth, and why healing is often less about fixing ourselves and simply more about returning to the truth. We also discussed my journey as a professional harpist, educator, entrepreneur, and founder of Redeem Thyself, 7 Petals, and the Empowering Parents Network. Most importantly, though, we talk about the ways my faith, how God has continued to weave purpose through every thread of my life and all lives, even the ones that once seemed broken or out of place. I'm grateful to Garon at the Green Room podcast for the opportunity to share this conversation, and I'm honored to bring it to you today. I hope you enjoy our discussion.
Themes of life, exploring purpose, creativity, and personal growth. Here in the Green Room, we don't just talk about success, we talk about the journey. The lessons, the challenges, and the moments that shape who we become. Every episode is a real conversation designed to inspire, inform, and connect. So, wherever you are right now, get comfortable, lock in, and stay present because this is more than just a conversation, it's a story. Now, let's step into today's episode and episode 8 from survival to purpose. And today's conversation is one that I believe many people will deeply connect with, especially anyone who's ever had to rebuild their life, rediscover their identity, or rethink what purpose really means. And our guest today is Julie M. Lane. And Julie is a speaker, a writer, an educator, harpist, and founder of JM Lane LLC, where she leads 3 initiatives rooted in redemption, healing, and purpose. Through Redeem Thyself, she supports professional women navigating trauma, abuse, and the reclaiming of worth. And through 7 Pedals, she has returned to music after 30 years, creating contemplative harp arrangements designed for reflection, peace, and transition. And though the Empowering Parents Network, she equips parents of children with disabilities to navigate educational systems with clarity, confidence, and advocacy. Julie's life and work are deeply shaped by her journey through childhood trauma, abuse, failed marriages, resilience, motherhood, faith, entrepreneurship, and leadership. A classically trained harpist turned educator and professor, she has built multiple successful careers while learning an important truth. Resilience can build capacity, but it cannot define worth. Through her keynote, Redeem Thyself, weaving your story into God's purpose, and her podcast, the Stories podcast, Julie explores healing not as fixing ourselves, but as returning to truth and allowing every thread of our story to be redeemed into something meaningful, integrated, and whole. So, Julie, thank you again for taking some time to come out and join us here in the Green Room. So, yeah, welcome to the Green Room podcast.
Garon, thank you. And thank you for having me here today to share my story.
And yeah, just looking at that, reading your introduction, I had to take a breath because even as I was saying it, I was like, oh my God, this experience is amazing. So, what we do, we dive straight in if you're happy with that. So, I kind of want to because reading your history and the amazing work you've done, and just from the introduction we've done there, it's been a hell of a journey you've been on here. So I want to start, really, if it's okay, in regards to start at the beginning of your journey. So when people see the work you're doing now, speaking, writing, advocacy, and the music, it can seem like a very clear path, but your story includes a lot of rebuilding and rediscovery.
Mhm.
So if you're happy, to kind of start there, and when you look at your life today, it's kind of the first question for you in regards to what experiences most shaped you, who you've become to today.
Today, I think it's primarily my daughters, because regardless of the trauma, the abuse, my childhood upbringing, it's my daughters that have kept me focused, driven, have kept me impassioned with who they are, giving them all the love and the support and direction that I wish I had had as a child. They're both well into their 30s now, have beautiful families, wonderful husbands, and just watching them become who they are has been amazing. And yet, in all of that, at the same time, I don't treat myself as I have my daughters. And as you and I were talking earlier, when does what drives us to keep going, and where is our worth? And for me, I have to stop and say, how would I handle this situation if I was talking to one of my daughters? And then I have to talk to myself that same way. And that's really, really hard for me. But they have been the example for me on how to learn how to treat myself, how to find my worth, how to be kind to myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I have consciously beat myself up throughout my life. I just didn't think I was worthy, because the abuse started at such a young age.
Thank you for sharing that. And like what you said our chat earlier, it's so hard when you've been through what you have with the abuse and that side of things, and how your
Mhm.
self-esteem really drops and your worth just isn't there. And it's really hard, especially even to this day, when you start putting yourself first before others. I'm not sure about yourself. Sometimes I cringe a little bit, where I think I know it's the right thing to do, but I don't know, John up
Mhm.
the road needs some help, and sometimes we have to put ourselves first. So because we can't be everywhere, and we're still healing every day and growing every day, like everyone else around us. So it's really interesting. Somebody of your experience has that kind of tug of war inside themselves of putting themselves first. So I'm glad you're doing it and recognizing it, though, Julie. So in regards, if you don't mind me asking, and you spoke just earlier in regards about how openly your childhood trauma and abuse was. How did those early experiences, if you don't mind me asking, influence the way you saw yourself growing up?
I saw myself constantly walking on eggshells, um, unsure of where to go next. Uh, from the time probably I was a toddler, I can sense in my body the fear. My brother, who's only 18 months older than me, was quite the bully. He was intimidating. He was uh, he was just mean, and that sense of his unkindness, I was just always afraid. My parents weren't bad people. They were loving. My mom could be very intimidating. She was the disciplinarian of my two parents, and had very clear expectations of appearance. And so that didn't help. But my brother was just a mean, mean person. And as a result, sexually assaulted me throughout my adolescence.
Mhm.
And my childhood taught me I don't have boundaries. I'm not allowed to have boundaries.
Mhm.
that I need to be a people pleaser, not rock the boat, which I think is part of my mother's generation of, that I think they call them the silent generation, where you just stayed silent.
Yeah.
And I just didn't feel I had a voice. I was worthy. And yes, I've made all of these accomplishments. However, I still view them as what's the big deal? Some might say that's like imposter syndrome, but for me, that's too much on the surface for me. It's so much deeper
Mhm.
because of the trauma. I'm trying to still work through recognizing where I started and where I am today on this lifelong journey,
Mhm.
and try to see myself as others see me.
Wow, I think I took my breath away a bit there, Julian. Thank you for being so brave and sharing what went on with you. And it's so interesting when somebody unfortunately goes through that abusive side of locking themselves away. And it's very interesting with, within sessions, I've seen people so lock themselves away and not know their worth and don't feel they're
Mhm,
good enough. And it's very interesting. I've noticed a lot between, my practice is dominated really by males, but it's interesting coming from a female's perspective of how we shut ourselves down and people please. And it takes so long for people to kind of, because we've kind of been brought up with that habit and how to behave in that way. It's so hard to kind of unlock that and reverse that, if you like. The
mhm,
chat we were saying about earlier about putting ourselves first, where we kind of cringe, where it's like, "Oh,
mhm,
I should be helping somebody else. I shouldn't be having this help." So it's really interesting that so many people go into that patterns of behavior. But what's really powerful about you is that you're going through it and you're in that here and now moment and you're exploring and growing and taking each day as it comes. So, it's just really interesting looking at your past of, reading up on your website, your history of where you have come to this day and being so open with everything. So
mhm,
thank you for answering that for me. I really, really do appreciate that. And many people become highly capable because of hardship. When did you realize that resilience alone wasn't enough, within your journey?
I have not seen myself as resilient. I think as a result of the trauma
Hmm.
and of 3 abusive husbands, whether that was physical, verbal, emotional, staying busy was how I survived. And so I would set my mind on something that I felt impassioned about where I could give to others, and I ran with it.
Wow.
And my music was a safe space for me. It was something that was mine that no one could take away from me. But I'm not sure that I truly used that gift for myself. Um, Now that I'm coming back to it and really being able to hand pick the type of music I want to play, that music is touching my heart. I can feel it. It wasn't being on stage with amazing performers or within a symphony. It was, I had to find the music that really spoke to me.
Mhm.
And with my career in education, being able to give to families that were hurting, it just became my drive. And have stayed incredibly busy. I've accomplished much. However, I'm still struggling to accept that it's that impressive. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't think that it was really ever about feeling accomplished. It was about feeling driven to stay busy because that's how I stayed safe.
Wow. I must admit, thank you so much for this. I can so relate, like you said, the music in your comfort zone. As soon as you said that, I had goosebumps. And when you said, truly having the music really get you in your heart, I thought, oh my God, so powerful. what I see is that drive. I find that so inspiring, that drive where you're helping others, you're keeping busy with that side. And we still have that kind of every so often, that kind of like, Julie's self-care pops up every so often, and we still try and struggle with sitting with that sometimes. So Julie's drive kicks back in, and then obviously, our kind of escape zone, so to speak, is obviously our music, and it's our little comfort zone, which kind of locks us away from the world and gives us that little bit of peace. So I'm loving these answers, Julie, because that really gave me goosebumps, especially what you said about the music. I could so relate to that. So yeah, thank you for that. And I mean, what what when we look at kind of your journey and where you are, and was there a specific turning point that pushed you from surviving into actively seeking healing? Um, was there any that turning point, or that specific turning point that pushed you, into having this wake up moment, if you like, or seeking this healing stage? What was that turning point for you, Julie?
That turning point was it was my last marriage, which was threatening physical abuse, that was constantly verbal abuse, and being, backed into a corner, being yelled out about who did I vote for in the last election when it hadn't come out in the way he wanted it, or how dare you threaten to call the sheriff because it could ruin my career, because he has licensing with the federal government to do what he does. It was never an apology about one's own behavior. It was also, my daughters were grown. I didn't have to watch out for them. They have amazing husbands. And so when they were saying, hey, mom, you need to get out of that space. He owned several firearms, very much into hunting and so forth, had some ghost guns that he had created. They were fearful of me being hurt. And I don't think that had ever been verbalized. I sensed it. Of course, I knew that they cared. They're like it's kind of a reverse baby bears watching out for mama bears, the type of relationship I share with them. But when my older daughter said to me, Mom, if something happens to you and you don't leave, I will never forgive you. Wow. And it was like, whoa, she's serious. And although I have never been opposed to getting help, I've been in therapy, started in early college to try to deal with what my brother put me through. And I never felt that connection or support from my then husband. Then with my second husband, and we went to therapy, family therapy or marriage counseling, when he said, I can't even stand being in the same room with you anymore. And he up and left after 18 years, and yet told my daughters I had done nothing wrong and you're wonderful, because I heard that conversation. Then I got into therapy because I needed to figure out how to be the one parent for my daughters, because they were still pretty young. And that's when I did my career change, because I had to get off the road. I needed to have some normal hours to raise my girls, and I raised them on my own. And so with my third and now final marriage, I got to, let me back up. During that time raising them, I was seeing a therapist on how do I be a parent by myself? How do I manage this? They have very different personalities, different needs. And then with my final marriage, it was that comment by my older daughter who said, Mom, I'm not going to forgive you. So it really pushed me to find a therapist, which I did. I've been with her for 5 years now. Wow. And she's still up in Montana, where we were living at the time. And I've moved home to California, but I go back up there about every two or three times a year and do 1 to 2 week intensives with her, because I'm in a point with my healing. And just because of who I am, I can do a lot of the work on my own. after those intensive weeks or two where I come home exhausted and then I get back to work again.
Wow. And do you mind me asking your daughter's name, who kind of stood your ground with you really? What's your daughter's name?
Oh, my daughter, my older daughter is Cynthia, and my younger daughter is Kimberly. Hmm.
Kimberly. So I think Kimberly, I'll say it to you now, if you listen to this, thank you to you, because I think you really stood your ground with your mum and took a brave move yourself as standing your ground and, hitting mum hard. I think that was mum's wake up
Hmm.
call. So yeah, thank you to you. And what a transition. uh, For me, I've been married once, divorced, as we spoke earlier,
Hmm.
and uh, in this lifetime, I'm quite sure it won't happen again. I- but I find really interesting where people like yourself with childhood, how you was treated, and how people get drawn back into this same patterns behavior, different people, whether it's friends, relationships, family members, how it's so interesting how people still get drawn into that. And sometimes, it's until we have that real big wake up call where, like with your daughter, being very blunt with you, that was your kind of real big reality check here, where, when I always say to people, come to therapy, and it sounds like you've done so much work as well, Julie, where I just so admire with, marriages coming and going, all sorts of dynamics there. Again, what I say to everybody, not, therapy isn't for everybody, but I always say to my new clients that, look, this is about you and your needs, not my ego. If you can't, find that connection with me, that is fine. And that's one thing what this is about. It's about the client's needs and wants, not our egos. If a therapist's ego's up here, well, they should choose a different career. But in general, what I find really fascinating with you, and what I say, you built such an amazing relationship with that therapist. I could imagine seeing, with all that time you've worked with them, that transition, even from that therapist seeing you who you was back 5 years ago today. I could imagine that's such an amazing experience for them. And obviously you go there, as I call, like top up sessions. That's what I normally say to people, that even if you just have a top up session just to recharge and give you that guidance, and it sounds like you're doing that. And yeah, it's just such a powerful transition you've made here. I get so excited hearing about this. And I mean, we mentioned, obviously we're talking about kind of how did kind of like faith begin to, because obviously you've been through therapy, you've had kind of a wake up call from your daughter, you put all this work into helping others as well. So how did faith begin to kind of reshape the way you understood your story, if you like?
Well, I didn't, I grew up going to church from time to time, but at some point, my parents left the church. I remember my mom making the comment that the people at the church um, didn't act like people who believed in what they were preaching. And my parents were quite dismayed. My music had a lot to do with my faith and keeping me strong. Uh, being a harpist, doing all kinds of holiday, Christmas shows, really brought me into the church as an adult. And I was baptized when I was 24. And about that same time, I was working with the gospel artist Sandy Patty
Wow.
and doing some shows with her when she was in Los Angeles. And that really cemented my faith. And my faith kept me moving forward. My daughters grew up in Christian schools, and their faith continues with them to this day. But in all of that, I saw everyone else as worthy. I saw God caring for everyone else, and that was my job. And working with families with children with disabilities, knowing that God doesn't make mistakes, knowing that these children had a purpose and I needed to help them find that. But it was never about my own worth. I felt I was still sitting on that outside of the community because I wasn't worthy enough.
Wow.
And my faith has never dwindled. It has never shifted. And there have been times when I have been depressed enough where my faith wasn't at the forefront and I had to bring myself back to it. But I never questioned what I believed or should I believe something different.
Mm.
I'm always investigating. I think, as you mentioned earlier, I love learning. And so I explore the way other people's spiritual lives work, what they want to, what they're seeking. But my faith has always been here. It's now being able to say the words, I am worthy, which is still hard for me to say. It feels funny.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm learning that what my brother had instilled in me, that I wasn't worthy, no one would ever want me. Um, the blaming, the shaming, the name calling, um, of how terrible I wasn't lovable. Um, I've carried that with me, and I still do today. And that's what those relationships that I've had are about, was me trying to prove to myself I was worthy, that someone did want me. And so I would marry into relationships with people who were of faith, who said they were Christians, that they love God, and you know, Christ is the Son of God. But yet the way they treated me was just like my brother did. And so I kept trying to find my worth in mankind versus my worth in my faith as a child of God.
Mm. How really interesting. That's kind of made me reflect on a lot of things really, and again, I'd say I'm spiritual. I don't say that I have any particular following, if you like, but how interesting that you married people who had this faith and didn't really believe what they were doing, and I can really relate to some of this, Julian. A very close friend of mine, Kevin, he went down the spiritual route, like spiritual fairs and all that
Mhm.
side. And what I found interesting, and I'm not saying everyone's like that, there's good and bad in all, as we know, but what I found really interesting was people in that area, if you like. But then I could see some kind of resentment around dynamics of people, or when I was on my spiritual journey, I started on my Reiki side, my level one, and kind of found my own way through that way. But what I
Mhm.
found really interesting is how things could be quite competitive and quite quite a bit of resentment going on in that area, if you like. So I kind of took quite a bit big of a step back from that. But then what was interesting with you is that sometimes you'll be pulled away from your faith and then be drawn back to that. What I find really interesting with my own spiritual journey is that, whether we say the universe, our guides, or whoever it is we call out to, I can really find myself sometimes disconnecting to whatever it is, and then being pulled back to that. So I can really, I find I'd love to speak to you. I'd speak to you for hours about that, but I'd really love to pick your brain one day with that side of things. If at one point when you're free, because I find it interesting that transition which we make, in having not different belief systems, but very similar, being pulled away from faith and then drawn back in. And even though we're making these kind of quite carnage decisions in life. We
Mhm.
I'm not sure whether we're doing it as life challenges to gain us more experience for the next phase in life, next stage in life. Sorry. I generally don't know what it is, really, but it's so many inspiring people like yourself who I've come across with, my career and all these amazing people. They've gone through some of the most hardest challenges, even more than some of the people I've worked with, in private practice and the helping sector. Some of these workers and people like yourself, it really inspires me that so much people don't realize in the work we do how much damage has been done to ourselves and how we've had to really grow from that. So, yeah, I really would love to pick your spiritual brain about that at some point. So, thank you for sharing that. And sorry, I've
Yes.
got so much in this, but you're making me reflect on so much certain stages of my journey where I thought, oh my God, I can so relate and being pulled away from. My spiritual side and being dragged back into it. And as you know yourself, we get an extra challenge. And I don't know why I'm not sure about you. We get one challenge and then the universe goes, here you go. There you go, Julie. We got another hurdle in front of you. And I just don't understand how we keep going. But we are believing in ourselves. We are starting to
Mhm.
become proud of ourselves. And, as we know, that's the awkwardness. That's what makes us judder. But, we're always growing. So, looking at, I can only imagine a lot of people listening might recognize that pattern, functioning well kind of on the outside while
Mhm.
carrying like this deep struggles internally. And that kind of brings us to the heart of your message today, if you like. And I mean, y- taking it to kind of redeem thyself, what redeem myself really means. So what does redeem myself thyself, sorry, mean to you personally?
Well, when I was trying to come up for a name for my Instagram platform, I I've been struggling in my healing journey to bring that inner child out of the deep, deep, dark pit that she lives in. She's stuck in there. And my Christian faith tells me, God redeems me. And yet I knew that unless I could forgive myself, that I could, before I could move forward and let God forgive me, I had to somehow get this inner child out and healed. And so Redeem Myself came about because I need to come alongside God's work. And I needed to forgive myself, to redeem myself from what society um, may view as unworthiness. I've been married 3 times, divorced 3 times. And because I don't tell anyone my story, people who've known me for years, when they learned my story, they were really taken back
Wow.
because I don't personify it. It's all deeply hidden. So redeeming myself is about healing. It's about um, being kind, being forgiven, um, or forgiving to myself. It's finding my path towards healing. And when I was talking to my dear friend, I said, "What do I call this? I've got to pull myself out of where my gut is."
Mhm.
And so I went with the name of redeeming myself, redeem thyself, because in doing so, then I can walk closer to God.
Mhm.
Where did you go? Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Now my screen went white.
That's
Huh.
okay. It'll catch up and it'll go along, Julie. So
Oh, okay.
any of this I can cut
There you
out
go.
and edit it. So
Okay.
that's
My
fine.
apologies.
That's right.
Um, so in redeeming myself, I'm able to forgive. I'm able to heal,
Mhm.
feel worthy, to begin to live
Mhm.
a full life, which I'm still working to do.
Mhm.
Um, but it had to be the first step, is healing what is so embedded in my gut from almost almost 60 years of trauma,
Wow.
to be able to move forward.
Wow, that's really moving and quite powerful there, Judy. Thank you. And you often talk, what's really interesting about our conversations in regards, you often talk about like kind of participation in redemption rather than surviving hardship. What does that kind of participation look like to you?
That sense of anticipation,
Mm,
fearful, scared. It's that constant mental battle of, am I really allowed to? Am I really allowed to be happy?
mhm,
Am I allowed to sit down with my harp and really speak to myself through it? Am I allowed to pull over on the side of the road to look at a magnificent view of the mountains, snow capped peaks? Um, it's all the, am I allowed to? Am I allowed to do this for myself? Am I allowed to let others know about it? Because anything I do for myself, I felt afraid for others to know because I wasn't worthy to do those things. And it's not that I'm comfortable with those concepts yet. I am that fellow traveler. I don't know if I will ever fully heal in my lifetime because of there is so much hurt. There's so much to be fixed. Granted, we're all broken, right?
Sure, sure.
I will be broken in areas that I don't even know about yet in the future. So it's always a journey. It's always walking with myself, and in anticipation of being able to heal came the need to tell my story. And I needed to wait and do that after both my parents had passed because I know it would have upset them greatly for
Mhm.
me to sit here and talk about the abuse I went through with my brother because they had no idea that was going on under their own roof. Um, Not until I was well into adulthood did they learn about it. And I came to the realization the only way I was going to start healing it was if I stopped hiding.
Mhm.
And through Redeem Thyself, I now know there are women all over the world who have experienced what I have, and that the TV shows I grew up with, Leave It to Beaver, The Brady Bunch, that's not normal life.
Yeah, sure.
um, Having learned about former classmates from grade school who've experienced what I have experienced, I really wasn't all by myself. Um, there really is a community of women that um, need to come together so we know that we're not alone.
Sure. I mean, God, wow. Wow, you definitely give me a lot to reflect on there. And thank you again for giving me the opportunity to be able to, sorry to hear your mum and dad passing, and thank you for making this very brave and inspiring move to share your story with myself. I mean, it takes a great person with great strength really to be able to share this with me and the listeners, and I'm quite sure it's really moving me, and not just saying this as a person but as a guy. It's really moving me at the moment, in a positive way, and making it really inspiring. So you never know, you might be my first guest where I might even have a bit of a moment, Julie. So thank you so much for sharing that. As we know, I laugh with my supervisor sometimes because I do release the emotions sometimes, especially when you turn people around. Us guys can admit we have emotions, but we pretend we don't sometimes. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's really moving this so far. So thank you. That's really kind of made me think of how lucky I am to have people like yourself to be able to trust and be part of the Green Room podcast. So this story is so inspiring, and I can imagine there's going to be thousands and thousands of Julies out there, if you like, kind of stuck in that same place where you've been for years on end. And yeah, I really do hope, I will promote the hell out of this podcast like I do with all my other ones, just to kind of, if we can reach out, even if it's to that one Julie who's
Mhm.
struggled, we've done our bit, haven't we, so to speak. So it's when we kind of look at, many people carry that kind of shame from trauma, which I find really interesting. Hearing your story, I've had so many people tell me the same thing, and patterns behavior, which we does. How does kind of redemption, if you like, change that narrative? How does that change for you?
It's still a journey that I'm on, but that journey is becoming lighter. It's lifting the burden of secrecy. It's lifting the opportunity to come back to my music, to explore what touches me personally.
Mhm.
Um, it's it's still keeps me from fully living, though,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm too afraid to. We're all afraid to do things we've never done before. And for those of us who've experienced trauma and abuse, to allow ourselves something that we've never had, that most people have had, it's hard for others to comprehend what the struggle is in allowing ourselves to do something for ourselves, to feel happiness, to feel joy, to feel excitement when those have been robbed. Why would I want those robbed again? So redemption is giving me that space to at least ask the question, why not? Why not try? Why not try to feel happy?
Mm-hmm.
Return to what touches you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's definitely given me some insight. Excuse me. And we kind of, would you say, kind of like when we look at healing, you know, he- is healing about fixing ourselves or about kind of rediscovering the truth?
I think healing's a lifelong journey. It's just that all of our journeys are different, and
Mm-hmm.
some of us may be more weighed down or dragging um, larger bags of the past behind us.
Mm-hmm.
For me, rediscovering the truth, I struggle with because I don't know if I ever knew what the truth was. Because that trauma started so early on, there are days I do ponder who would I have been if I hadn't experienced what I did during childhood? Who would I have become? How would I be different? But I don't spend a lot of time on it because there's nothing I can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, it's discovering for the first time what the truth is. It's acknowledging the damage, it's acknowledging my talents, my purpose, and discovering myself for the first time on how I want to live the rest of my life.
Sure.
And so I don't spend much time on that rediscovery piece.
Mm. Sure. That's, yeah, one hell of a transition there of going from, and it can be really hard what we spoke about, comfort zone and what
Mhm.
I work with people sometimes when we shift out of that kind of comfort zone into our learning zone. And it's so interesting where people have been through similar to yourself, Judy, are so scared of kind of coming out of that comfort zone, if you like. And as you know yourself, we dip in and out of our learning zone, we jump back into our comfort zone, and we do grow from that one way or another. And people don't realize that it's one of the hardest things for any of us to be able to do. And that big word, the fear, the scared. And what I've noticed, and again, I can only go to some aspect of male perspective because I've only explored with males with this. But as I explain to them, it's like they go into this real vulnerable child mode, that fear, that scared that you're not capable of being able to do this or you're not good enough. And it's so powerful seeing people kind of going between those modes, that real big vulnerable child, that massive vulnerable child, and then having to kind of come out of your comfort zone into our learning zone. And we're forever testing the water, if you like, to kind of have that grow. Can we trust this person, or most importantly, can we trust ourselves? So
Mhm.
it's very fascinating your transition there, Judy, and really thank you so much for sharing that. And I mean, a big one here. This is reaching out to the women out there who have currently stuck in that place where
Mhm.
you was in the past, and you had to really battle to kind of get yourself back on track. And what are the first steps someone can take when they want to begin that process, if you like?
I think it's knowing that you're not alone. It's finding that peer support that allows you to be vulnerable, allows you not to be judged, where you can travel alongside like people. It's making the conscious effort of knowing and acknowledging everyone is broken. Everyone carries a story.
Mhm.
Yes, some are much more traumatic than others. And yet, also knowing that if we're still here, if we're still functioning, um, we have the strength to overcome. We have the strength to move forward.
Mhm.
Because if we've managed, as I try to tell myself and to believe, I raised two daughters on my own.
Mhm.
I've had two incredible careers,
Mhm.
and I'm a good person. And so there is strength in there. And now I just need to shift that strength to the healing process
Yeah,
while trying to maintain what has kept me moving forward my entire life.
sure. I mean, it's really interesting how people respond. I find this a lot where people kind of recognize they've started to recognize they're a good person. As you know yourself, you've been so used to not feeling that way and acknowledging it now. And it's so interesting the amount of people I've seen do that where they are acknowledging themselves, but they do that kind of awkward laugh, if you like, during that. A lot of people I've noticed do that where they kind of express like, yeah, I am proud of myself, and they have that kind of laugh which kicks in. And I'm not sure whether that's kind of I I don't know. I do it myself. If someone gives me a compliment, I kind of laugh it off sometimes because it is praise to myself, but I don't know what to do with it. So I find it really fascinating. Many of us do that, and yeah, it's really amazing to see that you're focusing now. It's like now's your time to heal, and I've support you to the moon and back, especially what your journey is and having successful careers through that. I mean, it's really inspiring to hear. And it's really interesting. Your story also highlights something that I've noticed, many leaders seem to struggle with, so to speak, in regards to success without a true sense of worth. I really find that really, really interesting with all the amazing things and, families, children, women you're helping out there and trying to kind of find your own true sense of worth through that and we recognize it a little bit, but we pull away from it again. So it's really interesting that people like yourself in your position really do that, and it's really fascinating. So you've built kind of multiple careers and stepped into like leadership roles, but you've also shared that success doesn't always heal deeper wounds. And I mean, if we look at your kind of how did your kind of childhood experience shape you, how you approach kind of success and achievement?
And that's hard for me to know.
Mhm.
It's part of my journey I don't fully comprehend yet. I know that growing up, I was encouraged to befriend the new kid at school, to explore the ways every people think. That I shouldn't just make a judgment on this is what I like unless I've explored the other viewpoint of others, whether
Mhm.
that was through reading or talking with friends.
Sure.
Um, I think that the success I've had is out of that drive to stay busy. If I'm busy, I can't be seen. If
Mhm.
I'm busy, I stay safe. People
Sure.
can't take advantage of me. And I reflect a lot on trying to figure out how I got to where I am in both of my careers and how I raised my daughters and have this phenomenal relationship with both of them. And we
Mhm.
share that as a threesome.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I really don't know how to answer that yet.
Sure.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, so no, that's fine. You're doing amazing. I really appreciate this. And did you ever feel like accomplishment was tied to proving your value? Do you find, did you ever find that?
I don't think so because I don't see myself as accomplished. I can say it, but I still don't believe it. I don't know what the big deal is. An incredible career in the music industry in Los Angeles. That
Mhm.
was, in a sense, taken from me.
Mm.
Not something I wanted to have stop, but it was the need to raise my daughters.
Yeah.
Um, my career in education, into my professorship. I hold 4 college degrees, including my doctorate. I don't know. I love to learn. I love to keep busy.
Mhm.
Um, don't have any intention of retiring anywhere in the near future.
Wow.
um, I want to stay busy. I like being active.
Yeah, that's just amazing. It just blows me away of what you're doing and maintaining that. Yeah, it just blows me away. And I mean, it seems like many leaders seem to kind of, you know, whether that's the right word, leader, but I think that's the best I can look at it for you at the moment. And
Mhm.
that probably doesn't sit 100% right with you, but how you push forward despite internal struggles. Did you experience that tension? Because obviously being career minded, you spinning all these plates at once, and obviously we've got internal struggles there. Did you experience that tension throughout your career?
It The tension of keeping my private life secret, yes. That has been very intentional. Throughout my careers, I have stayed in touch with very, very few people. And when I mean very few, I think maybe 2 or 3 that I still stay in contact with. I consider friends,
Mhm.
especially my dearest friend who is a former boss. Uh, I I don't talk about my personal life at work. I'm very focused. I'm a worker bee. I don't chit chat at work. I get in. I'm very much a collaborator. I love
Mhm.
community, but it's got to stay centered on work. I don't talk about my personal life.
Wow, that's I was just visioning me being in your office. I think I'd be probably sacked by lunchtime, Julie, because I talk too much. Oh my God, I just visioned you walking in the office and so focused on what we need to do. And it'd be like, here's
Mhm.
Garon telling his life story, over a coffee. Yeah, I can envision that. It'd be like, yeah, I'll be losing my job at lunchtime. Yeah, how interesting, how so focused you are with that. That's very,
Mhm.
very interesting. And I mean, how obviously can people begin separating kind of like their identity from their uh, product? If we have a look at kind of looking at this, also connects to like a powerful insight you've shared about like your faith and your suffering and kind of not 100% feeling accomplished as well, and still on that journey kind of understanding what your true value is here. And even though you're doing these amazing busy wonderful stuffs, and obviously like you said, you're a collaborator, you like getting things done, and it's really amazing to see what you're doing here, but we still have that kind of struggle of kind of knowing our worth, and it's really interesting knowing our values of all this as well. So it's really interesting there. And I mean, you've spoken about how people sometimes confuse, if we look at kind of confusing endurance or suffering with
Mhm.
righteous, if you like. So when we have a look at kind of misplaced humility, I mean, what does that mean to you?
That was a phrase that my dearest friend, who was my former boss, we have been soul sisters, so to speak, for about 25 years now. Um, she's about 10 years older than I am. And we connected when I started working where she was serving at the time. And when she left, we stayed in contact. But she told me, I don't know, several years after I had said this, that she'd listen to me talk during my interview, and I had such misplaced humility. And that I don't see my value. I don't see my accomplishments as accomplishments,
Mm.
that I don't see the worth of my accomplishments, not only for myself, but and how they are so giving to others. Um, I do at times question what made me um, so successful as a special education professional. And I actually am doing some research now. I want to write a book about the qualities of a special education professional and what they need to have to serve effectively, based on research and my own life experiences
Wow.
and family stories from the families I served. But I, I tell people thank you when they make a compliment to me, but I have a hard time accepting its worth.
Wow. Thank
Not their
you.
thank you. Their thank you's worthy, but the worth of what I have done to be thanked for.
Wow. It's still kind of finding it hard to acknowledge that, isn't it? Yeah, that's really,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, there's so much insight on this show at the moment. I'm going to be with my notepad and pen because there's so many relatable stuff, and you kind of expanded kind of my mind a little bit here. So I really appreciate this. And I mean, what message would you give someone who feels stuck in between kind of like their faith and their healing? I mean, what message would you give to them, Julie?
The message of how do they connect together.
Mm-hmm.
In my own journey, I get them separated at times. Get all these mind wars going on
Mm-hmm.
as I try to heal, and I forget that my faith is right there alongside it,
Mm-hmm.
and how they come together. Um, for my faith, I reflect back on my Bible verse, which is Proverbs 31:25-26, that I am a woman of dignity. I speak with wisdom. I've experienced much, and that I should feel confident enough that I can laugh about the past and just put it behind me, and how ridiculous pieces of it were, not in my own doing, but how ridiculous those comments from people and the way they treated me. They aren't worthy of my time.
Good on you.
And so for me, it's consistency of remembering what my faith is,
Mm-hmm.
what I believe, and how it comes alongside my healing is what I would tell others. What is your thought process away from your healing? What do you believe in? What's your spiritual life? And how does that become married to your healing journey?
Sure. That's really insightful. And yeah, that's question after question. Sorry, I keep filing these questions at you, but I just kind of keep having them up. And I'm like, God, I just want to kind of see where Judy is, if you like. So if any of her invasive always told me, back off, Garon. But I really do appreciate I'm just firing off these lines, but more insights you being given to myself. So I really appreciate it. So another part of your story as well, which we scraped the surface of that, is obviously, which is really powerful, is your return to music. So
Mhm.
you return to playing the harp after 30 years of and now which eventually led to your project Seven Pedals, which I was
Yeah.
having a look at this morning. And what was it like picking up that harp again, after 30 years, Julie?
Well, my harp is pretty much always been with me. There was a 5-year period where I didn't have a harp. Um, and that's another long story in and of itself. But I started playing when I was 10. And when I was playing professionally, I had 3 concert grand harps at the same time, just because of my work habits. And so the harp I have here is the first one I've had. When I had that, after that 5-year period, I didn't have one. This one I purchased just a couple of years ago. It's the same maker and model as my last concert grand, and sometimes she just sits in the corner. I look at her and I say, "Hello, beautiful." And I have a moment, and it's the battle of, am I allowed to sit down behind you? Um, am I allowed that day to feel that warmth inside when I do get to play?
Mhm.
It's part of my healing journey because it's part of who I am, and allowing myself to re-embrace that part of me and to create the music that touches me and I hope will touch others as I work on these arrangements of artists that I listen to every day.
Wow. Wow. And did did reconnecting with music reconnect you with like a different part of yourself?
I think that I, I think the answer to that is yes.
Mm.
Um, I am connecting with music that really I can remember feeling I wanted so much more to be a part of,
Mhm.
uh, that I couldn't be. I felt that if I couldn't play all the instruments in the orchestra at the same time, I couldn't fully be in the music.
Mm.
If I couldn't be a vocalist and be able to share the words that I was feeling in my heart, I couldn't really be in my music fully.
Mm.
And so now I'm allowing myself, I'm opening that door, particularly with one piece that has resonated with me for decades,
Mm.
of just sitting down and playing that one piece 4 or 5 times. And now I'm slowly starting to integrate other music that I want to
Wow.
purposefully arrange and publish and record,
Wow.
that really reflects who I am.
Wow. Yeah, I do. I must admit, we discussed before. Obviously, we started the podcast with my music, and I can just, I'll sit here for hours, especially if you get certain synthesizers, even harps and pianos. I just drift off with it, and I find the harp so soothing and relaxing. I find it grounding if I ever hear it anywhere. And how did the idea come for like seven pedals and another amazing project which you're doing here? I mean, how did the idea for seven pedals begin?
Well, I wanted, there's so many people call themselves harpists, and I wanted an original name for the platform when I began it. And most people don't know a concert harp has 7 pedals on it, one for each of the musical notes. And your feet are just as busy as your fingers.
Hmm.
And so I came up with 7 pedals, and I wanted to tell, and because that name 7 pedals is unique, I really wanted to tell my unique story, of my music, of how my music has touched me throughout this life of trauma and abuse,
Hmm.
how it became a part of me at such a young age.
Mm.
And it became a place I could go to where no one else could take it away from me.
Wow. And why do you think people, and it's really interesting on some of my journey myself, I kind of, in my life transition, I just pulled away from music. I just shut it out of my life. And why do you think people often abandon creative parts of themselves during those difficult times or seasons, as you say? I mean, why do you think we abandon that creative parts of ourselves?
I think on the very surface, we can say because our lives get so busy, in work, raising children, and so forth. For
Mm.
me, it hurt too much, um, to to allow it to touch me the way it used to. And if I knew if I sat down behind it and did what I loved, it would hurt too much. It would remind me of what had been taken away from me.
Mm.
So at the time when I left my music to raise my girls, I was in a family, a very large family, 7 children,
Wow.
married nieces, nephews, and so forth. Um, and having a unique career that I did, it's not that I like talking about myself in that regard and bragging about the artists I was working with. But in that family, no one took an interest in my music. And I was very much, it was a modern day shunning, is what it was. I'd walk into this house for 18 years. No one would say hello to me. No one would say happy birthday, ask me how I was doing, um, wanted, if I couldn't attend a family event because I had a gig somewhere, no one was interested in that. And so my music was shunned in essence. And that just closed my heart to it because it hurt too much to not be heard.
Mm,
That's this piece of my life.
mm. That's really interesting how people can kind of, somebody like yourself who's so creative and talented and being in this world where everybody's shutting you down and having no
Mhm.
interest whatsoever. For me, when I used to witness that or have that happen to myself or had clients or people have that. I'm not as bad as I used to be, but I used to find myself brewing up a little bit because it's, not so much of the aspect of bullying, but it's the psychological side of that, of how people just shutting people down. And, whether you're male or female, that loneliness can be really, really hard. But I think you kind of become immune to it. You kind of put up with it if you like and just
Mhm.
carry on as we do, even though we know this isn't right. But I don't find myself brewing up anymore in regards to how people, somebody like yourself, can be so talented and being open the best you can, and every single person within that dynamics can shut you down. I mean, I, even as a trained therapist, sometimes I question, what's going on with those people's minds. Is it resentment? Is it jealousy? Or,
Mhm.
there are some people I have worked with, been on that opposite side, if you like. But yeah, sometimes yeah, I'm shocked really at how sometimes as humans, no matter what our background, faith, or where we are on this planet, sometimes I shake my head in disbelief at how some people treat others, especially with talent. It's
Mhm.
like, don't shut them down, inspire them,
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that with me. And what has now? Because obviously we're we're in the good phase here. What's music helped you to rediscover about yourself? Because you've had it shut down away for so long, and having that kind of brave move, what I found powerful earlier when you're saying, am I worth enough to sit behind the harp again? So what has helped, what has music helped you rediscover now about yourself?
It's about opening up my heart. It's about feeling again, letting my heart feel.
Mm,
I have yet to play in front of anybody. Um, since I have come back, it's really me and my harp, and I'm allowing myself to embrace her. That's my first step. I'm afraid for others to hear, if I have a shared common wall, in a duplex or something like that, I'm
yeah.
afraid if they'll hear me, if I will even disturb somebody with my music. I'm afraid of making someone angry.
Right.
Uh, it's that not allowed to take up space. And so right now it's my pups, my harp and me. And I am just allowing myself to re-embrace it. And I'm very in the very early stages of that until I feel confident enough to share it.
Wow. Well, I wear, outside of the podcast, obviously, I really would love to keep in contact with you, and especially the music aspects. I know you're coming out of kind of that comfort zone into your creative side again, and I can only imagine how long that must have took to turn around and face that and kind of find and create our passion again to what we love. So I find that I'd love to pick your brain in the near future of that side, especially with some of your music. I can only imagine when it comes to the harp. Just I can imagine me sat downstairs because I've got where I'm renting my place. I've got like a little tiny fireplace, and I've always dreamed of it. And I can just imagine a little bit of harp music in the background, Julie. That's like a little hint for the near future. So if that's like a little bit of harp music and my little fire on my own, I'd be quite happy. So yeah, that's just like a little hint for the future.
Okay.
So um so again, not only all this, there's so much, and like I said, I'd speak to you on hours and end. And your work also extends into like the advocacy side for families navigating like
Mhm.
complex systems as well. So it's kind of like empowering parents network, if you like. So you support parents of children with disabilities in navigating educational systems as
Mhm.
well. And I mean, what inspired you to start Empowering Parents Network? What inspired you to do that, Julie?
Well, I've been in the special education field here in the US for the past 30 years. I have served as a teacher, what we refer to as a program specialist,
Mhm.
a school administrator, a director of special ed. And then for the past 16 years, I've been a professor at two different universities here in California or here in the US, supporting future teachers or special education researchers doing their doctoral work.
Mm.
And the consistent story I always hear is that parents are so uninformed. And that's not because it's the parents' fault. Um, Special education is its own culture. We have our own language, we have our own way of doing things. And when families are brought into that for the very first time, it's overwhelming. It's
Mm.
also a time of grief for the parent
Mm.
because when your child is diagnosed with a disability, all those dreams you have for your child shattered because
Mm.
now what? Are they going to be able to grow up and be independent? What are they capable of doing to follow their dreams? And that grief process just happens again and again and again for parents of children with disabilities.
Mm.
And my own background in serving families and being a better listener than a talker. As educators, we talk too much. We need to listen to the stories of the families we serve. And in listening to those stories, we can then begin a relationship of collaboration, of rapport, of
Mm.
partnership, of community.
Mm.
And so empowering parents is about giving parents the background knowledge, the understanding of the culture,
Mhm.
so that they can step into that meeting, into that classroom, and have a sense of being able to advocate for their child. And
Mm.
so empowering parents is exactly about that. It's allowing parents to come together within a community, a virtual community, based on the US special education system,
Mhm.
to learn, to connect with one another, and to understand how they can support their child moving forward.
Wow, I must admit, I was going to fire more questions today, Julie, and you've actually just answered my second two. I was just guiding through. I thought, okay, she could hit the final one. That's brilliant. I just thought, oh my God, thank you. So again, obviously, you mentioned about some of the challenges the parents can have. I can only imagine. I haven't got children myself. I did have stepchildren many years back. But being a biological parent, if you like, I can only imagine. I'd be lying if I said I can truly empathize and understand what parents go through. I can only, I've got friends of mine who are parents, and there are disabilities there, and some of the challenges they've had in the past many years ago were, yeah, quite tough for them. And I mean, how can parents approach those systems, if you like, with confidence? Because obviously you're empowering these parents, you're being there for them and kind of being their voice, if you like, and helping them overcome these challenges. So, how can parents approach these systems with confidence, Judy?
I think to begin with is to ask questions, ask lots of questions. When you walk into these meetings for the first time, I fully understand how overwhelming they can be. And if you're not comfortable asking questions in that first meeting, then step away maybe for a week, ask to regroup again.
Mm,
and come with your questions to help you understand, to learn,
mm.
um, and asking educators, professionals to speak in terms that are not full of jargon. You know, the special education is like alphabet soup, as in many careers, we speak in acronyms. And
Yeah.
even when we um, inform parents what those acronyms stand for, we then assume that they understand what that is. It would be for me reading a legal brief. You know, I would need all kinds of explanations on a 10-page contract of understanding what all of that meant.
Sure.
And so parents really need to find the strength and the confidence to simply start by asking questions.
Wow. And I really hear what you're saying there in regards to all the jargon which gets chucked around, and some people really don't understand that. And just hearing what you say, I could imagine you could, with the guidance which the wonderful work you guys do there, it sounds like you guys are meeting these parents with compassion and
Mhm,
understanding and letting them know that you can take a step back, you can kind of reflect on what you're thinking and come back if you need to be. And
mhm,
it's what I've kind of learned with any sort of helping sort of sector. And as we know, due to education, therapy, mental health, all sorts of
mhm,
dynamics and in the helping sector, so to speak, meeting these people with true compassion you know, it- there are people out there which do that, but there's been many people I've known in which I can't name, but particular environments I've worked in where I've been very fortunate in my time, and I have had that moment when I've had to walk out the room after the session. I've been a little bit choked and a little bit emotional because some of these people have generally said to me quite openly that like, you don't throw the jargon at me, you're not throwing all the academic stuff at me, and you're meeting me with compassion, you're showing us who you are. And for me, I struggle sometimes because I've had so many people in certain sectors I've worked at, sorry, in regards to they don't meet them with that compassion sometimes and just throw the stuff at them, and it's kind of like a cut off and shut off moment, if you like, and the
mhm,
people just left there, and I'm not surprised they don't wanna come back or they don't bother trying because people are not truly meeting people with any sort of understanding and compassion there. But what you're doing is breaking it down for people to understand this. So, yeah, really good on you. I find that really amazing to see that it is happening. I wish it could happen in more places all over the world, but it sounds like you're doing a hell of a lot of work there of giving that people that understanding that they have a voice, and you're kind of giving them that voice. So
mhm.
this is like really lovely to see. And I mean, what does this work? Again, we've gone. I keep going into the leadership. It's one of that words which I thought was right to ask you, but at the same time, it still don't quite sit with me. But I'm still going to keep firing it out there. I can only imagine Judy saying, "I'm not a leader, Karen," but with what you've done with these amazing projects and what you've done, I mean, what has this work taught you about kind of if we have a look at what you've done with these businesses? I mean, you just taking that form of leadership or guidance,
Mhm.
should we say? I mean, what has this taught you about that, like your leadership? What has that taught Julie?
Well, Garen, I will say I do know I am a leader. I don't always understand why, but I enjoy being in leadership positions. I enjoy mentoring. I enjoy helping others grow. But I think my leadership has always been rooted in my heart and never in my checkbook.
Wow.
I lead with my heart and I find people who need help, need a leader in order to move through challenging journeys. And whether that's trauma abuse or a parent navigating life with a child with special needs,
Hmm.
I lead with my heart and never with my checkbook. So,
Wow. Yeah, it's really powerful. Just that. It's like I want to write some of these things down, which you're telling me. Yeah, it's really powerful. Really, really powerful what you say there. It's just giving me. I can imagine when we get to the end of the session. I just kind of. It's going to give me so much for myself, Julie. Seriously, I'm so appreciative of this, and kind of moving from like survival to stewardship, if you like. I mean,
mhm.
what does stewardship mean in the context of someone's personal story?
Well, I think we often hear about servant leaders, but there's this particular philosophy of serving leader, and I serve everyone. I, every I serve all my followers by giving them the tools to grow themselves. I don't want to stay in a leadership position with the same followers because I
Okay.
want my followers to become leaders and to find advocacy, to find strength, to find healing, to become leaders themselves. So I'm always looking for how can I remove barriers in the lives of others so that they can heal, so that they can lead the next group. So I'm always looking at serving leadership to give back.
That's really interesting. Like I said, you've given me so much insight here, and looking at you being the leader for me, I so take my hat off to people like yourself, because I kind of, again, I'm going from my comfort zone to my learning zone, and this is all new to me. And I so admire people like yourself who have kind of took that charge, so to speak, and that leadership, and guiding people through that. And as you were saying that, I felt this charge in me saying, well, Julie can do it. Why can't you do it? So it's brought up some positive stuff here, by the way. I'm so appreciative to this. It's really, really, really interesting to see, with what you've been through with your, from childhood up until now, that you can do that. Where I kind of reflect back and I'm like, God, it's really inspiring to see someone, with what's happened in the past to who you are as a person now, of taking that leadership is just, I am a leader. I found that really powerful what you said there, and that kind of resonated something with me. And I think I'm going to sit with my fire for maybe a couple of hours saying, well, I can be a leader here. So, you have to send me an invoice, Julie, even though I've had you on as a guest here, but you've really, seriously, thank you. You've really given me some insight in regards to what you've been through with your life, and taking that leadership on the work you do. This is so blowing me away. Sincerely, thank you. And I mean, is there a moment when someone realizes that they've moved away from surviving, because where you was in life, surviving, getting through, if you like, to leading? It, is there like that moment someone realizes they've moved from like the survival side to the leading side of things?
I think for me, that has worked in going back and forth. To me, it's a yo yo. Um, the work that I've done, especially in education, when I've touched the lives of of a family member or a colleague, and they thank me in a very unique way, very powerful way, um, that's when I feel like I'm fulfilling my purpose. I feel that joy. And then as soon as I return back home, I'm back into survival mode. So it is in launching Redeem Thyself and Seven Petals and my work with empowering parents
Hmm.
that keeps me out of survival mode. And
Oh,
I guess maybe one could say, in a sense, my work is selfish, because it is the joy that I bring to others or that I can touch the lives of others that keeps me out of survival mode.
mm,
And so the more times I have the opportunity to speak about my projects, to touch lives, to empower others, um, it's healing me. It's how I'm becoming healed. So in our conversation today, I'm allowing myself throughout the conversation here and there to let your words touch my heart,
wow.
to let me feel happiness, to allow myself to know, and embrace that I really am touching you.
Mm,
That's helping me heal. It's
wow.
still hard to hear. I don't stay there all the time. I sink back into survival mode very easily,
Hmm.
uh, but I have to keep practicing as if.
Yeah.
And that's what the opportunity to speak with you here today is forcing me to do.
Wow.
And as my therapist says, act as if, act as if. The more you do it, the more you'll begin to believe it as well.
Wow. That's I knew you'd get me in this podcast where I feel, really inspired but a little bit choked to that reaching out and having that connection with people. And I really, really feel that reaching out to me and I really appreciate it. So, I have some of my clients, especially with some of the guys I worked with, we do use a lot of humor, saying females do that the same when you go through such tough stuff. Sometimes I can have quite dark humor, if you like, and I think that's how I cope with what's happened in the past. And I do use a lot of humor. Don't get me wrong. I've been in a depression state. I've been anxious. I've wanted to escape. I've been emotional. I've been angry. I've been all these emotions we go through. And what's really interesting when you see, and I'm sure you might, even though it sits funny with us, I'm not sure how. I'd be interested to see how you deal with this. But when I do make that move with that person and that transition we've made, especially when somebody comes to you so broken and so lost and fearful and lonely, when you make that transition, what I find really interesting, there's certain people out there, and I can assure you, you've really hit me with that in a positive way where it can make me feel really emotional. And I'm quite a thick-skinned guy, and again, I've done that nervous laugh because I know it's the truth. But I mean, that's really, really resonated hell of a lot of stuff in me, and kind of made me emotional in a way because of what you do. I'm really truly reaching out and being compassionate and having that connection with ourselves, with the work you do and what I do. So I use humor sometimes where I always remember a client of mine many years back. He was the very first one which done it to me, where we turned his life around in such a big way. And as a fairly new trained therapist, what do we do with our emotions? You don't get taught this in the classroom. And I always remember he turned his life around, got his own home, beautiful home for his family, which he didn't have, really tough upbringing from mum and dad. And he said, "Could we do our next session of can I do on my phone and film something for you?" And I thought, it's our last session. Yeah, sure, of course we can. And he showed me his new home. And honest truth, Julie, I was so choked and knocked back how he grew. Where I actually did release a couple of tears in my session, and this is very similar to myself. Where, and with guys, I'm quite sure females are the same. Where guys especially, when it comes to our emotions and feelings, we're used to blocking them out, and we used to, if a guy shows that, there's always guys making fun of other guys. That's what we do. And I always remember him saying, he goes, well, at the end of the day, one day, he goes, all I can say is, one, thank you so much for what you've done. Because I was there still a little bit choked and some tears, happiness coming down for me. And he goes, oh, well, he goes, at least I can tell people I made my therapist cry. So I just swooped it off. I said, look, it's windy in here. It isn't my tears. And I laughed, but you being a guest on here has really done that to me in a really positive way. And I mean, amongst all this, again, what keeps you grounded as your work continues, obviously, to grow? What keeps Julie grounded with this?
It's knowing that I'm fulfilling God's purpose for my life. Um,
Mhm,
that's where I come back to
mhm,
when I question, when something doesn't quite go as I thought it was going to. I keep coming back to being patient, to allowing God to do his work,
mhm.
and to knowing um, so deeply that this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Wow, thank you. And obviously, before we kind of close, I know I'm kind of taking up so much of your time now. I could sit here with you for, well, days, Julie, and just pick your brain. Um, I mean, just a final questions in regards to, if someone listening right now feels stuck, they're in that survival mode. Um, what would you want them to hear?
Really, that they're not alone, that we've all experienced life at different levels. Um, we've all processed life at different levels.
Mm, mm,
And to find that person, whether it's on Redeem Thyself platform or, a dear friend that you can begin to share that story with, um, that where someone will listen to your story, and so that
Mm.
you can begin that first step of healing.
Wow. And I mean, what is one truth about worth you wish more people understood?
Simply that we're all worthy, regardless of what has happened in our lives, whether we've done it to ourselves or others have done it to us,
Mhm.
regardless of our failures or our successes, our struggles, our challenges, and our strengths. That from the time we were conceived, our parents found us to be worthy, and that we are worthy of dignity, regardless of where we are in life.
Wow. Very powerful there. I'm sure that plenty of people can resonate with that. And Judy, thank you so much. I know I fired so many questions and I've still got lists and lists, and I'd love to stay connected with you outside of the podcast because again, to yourself and the guests I've had so far, I've got some more amazing guests like yourself. I truly want to say thank you to you. One, God, I feel a bit choked here in a positive way that I'm very so grateful. I've had such a amazing um podcast with my guest and yourself in regards to such a moving story of what you've done, and sincerely really inspiring. And I know we don't sit right with our compliments, and we don't kind of want that pat on the head because we don't know what to do with it sometimes when we
Mhm.
get compliments. But seriously, thank you so much. And your story reminds us that healing isn't about erasing our past. It's about
Mhm.
allowing every part of our story to be kind of woven into something meaningful. So I sincerely thank you for your time today, and I really really appreciate this, Judy. And as I said, I'll make sure I get everything right with my editing on the podcast, and I truly am so grateful for your time here. And so again, thank you so much, Julie. Is there anything you'd want to say? Any kind of call outs to anybody who's special to yourself out there who you'd like to reach out to say, here I am. This is what I'm doing now. Is there any message you wanted to be able to send out there to the listeners out there?
Just that, we're that I'm let me back up on that. Again, just that you're not alone. Reach out, you know, follow me, and chime in, and I do a lot of DMing with my followers, more so because their stories are private. And so
Wow,
I spend a lot of time on DMing versus in the captions.
wow,
Um, but that this is a safe community, and one that supports one another.
lovely.
So just know that you're not alone in all of this.
Well, thank you, and obviously I'll promote all the wonderful work you've done attached to this podcast, and I'll promote that through social media the best I can because there's so many amazing and wonderful things that you're doing for everybody else, Judy. Plus, obviously, rediscovering yourself, what you've been through. And I am that poker and prodder sort of person where I can't wait to that day until I get to hear that harp playing and the music you do. I just find it really inspiring and creative, and I can really relate to some of the things with finding yourself through music, gaining that confidence, having that fear, and what you said earlier in regards to kind of really reach out and kind of to my heart of what I say, that it just blew me away. I think that's why I got into that moment of kind of like, oh my god, I feel a bit emotional here. So sincerely, thank you so much for your time, and I really do appreciate it. And to everybody listening, thank you for being part of this conversation, and like Julie and many of the other amazing guests I had. If there is something in this episode which resonates with you, share it with somebody who might need to hear it, because stories like this remind us that growth, healing, and purpose rarely happen in straight lines. They're journeys, and until kind of next time, stay present and stay curious, and keep stepping into your own story. And what I'll do, I'm going to put all the information, what Julie does with her wonderful work and her, amazing family members working with her on this, and the people around her on that. So if this conversation resonates with you and you want to explore Julie's work further, you can connect with her with all the information which I'll put in the below, within the bio, within any of our posts which we put out there. So I will make sure, Redeem Thyself, Empowering Parents Network. There's so many listings I've got here, and most importantly, the 7 pedals as well. So I will make sure you got all the information there. And if you're somebody out there who's struggling, please do reach out to the likes of Julie. Not only has she got the amazing credentials with the academic side, as well as leadership, she's got this amazing personal story. And I'm a firm believer, people who've got that sort of, how can I say, that journey can so meet people with compassion in such a powerful way. And I can only imagine how amazing you are doing your work, Julie. So I sincerely, again, thank you so much for your time, and I really do appreciate you being part of the Green Room podcast. It's, as I say to all my guests, so it means so much to me, more than you know. And like you, it's something I've wanted to do for so long, and I'm not here to be famous. I'm not here to,
Mhm.
have people liking everything. I just want to be able to reach out and have this podcast reach out to that one Julie who's on the brink of giving up, and they don't make that choice. That's the whole purpose of me doing that. So thank you
Mhm.
so much for everything here, Julie. And thanks again for being a guest. I really appreciate this. And thank you to all the listeners out there. This is Garon and Julie signing out from the Green Room podcast. And yes, if you do resonate with anything what Julie says, please do get in touch, and I'm sure she'll point you in the right direction and motivate you to take charge for yourself. So thank you so much again, Julie, and thank you to the listeners out there. Thank you.
Thank you.